talk about selling, which I always talk about a lot. But specific, I want to talk about 2 things with it. Right? What are the 2 main things you guys sell to in selling? You guys remember? Pleasure and pain.
Hey, this is Blake Sloan. I've been selling real estate over 14 years. Our team of highly trained professionals, along with our unmatched marketing, has sold thousands of homes here in the Myrtle Beach area, and this is how we do it.
Now, what do you guys know about that?
More people are driven by pain than ever by pleasure.
Just what that's yep. Okay. That's what else?
It's easier to find the pleasure, it's harder to find the pain.
Yep. What else?
A lot of times people lie about the real reason. People run from pain. They need the pain to get the pleasure.
Here's the crazy part. Now, I gave you this before. How many people do you think are motivated by pain?
80%. 70%. Most people, they just don't tell you that.
Humans are 90% plus driven by pain. Meaning what? They will make a decision or do something to avoid pain versus to gain pleasure. Why is that, you think? It's human evolution, right? As human, if I'm in the woods and I hear something rustling in the leaves and the trees at night, what do you tend to do?
You don't
run, right? You get away from that because you want to avoid what? Pain, right? Something eating you, something getting you, whatever it is. And so this is how humans are in terms of what they do. And so that's the natural tendency for most people. Now, on the flip side, right, because it's obviously survival instinct here from the pain standpoint. But when talking to clients, which one do you think salespeople focus the most on? Pleasure. What do you think percentage-wise people talk about pleasure are? Be honest.
100%.
So as salespeople, what are we doing? Like I said, we're spending 100% of our conversation talking about pleasure. Now, what's the problem with that? Only 10% of people are actually driven by pleasure. And so as agents, we're talking about, man, this house would be so great for you. Can't wait till Christmas and your family in here. Right? Hey, let's get this house listed for you so we can get, so you can see your grandkids in Jacksonville. Right? Whatever it is, we keep talking about pleasure all the time, then we can't figure out why they don't listen to us and why they don't actually take any action. Why is that? Not motivated because why? We're selling to the wrong thing that moves people. And so this is just a great reminder, a wake-up call of like, look, and why here? Why do salespeople go to pain more often than pleasure? Why do they sell to pleasure more than pain? It's easier and it's more comfortable. It's very difficult to talk about pain sometimes, especially if you're not willing to talk about your own pain in your own life. The only thing I've learned in doing this a long time, being part of a warrior and being a certified trainer of other men and stuff, is that people will only talk about pain with other people, the willingness to willing to look at their own pain. So they hide from pain in their own life. Guess what they do with other people? They hide from it because it's very uncomfortable. And so this is a big problem with salespeople, right? And so that's the key part here. And then most of you guys are leaning into pleasure. And so that's the key part. And so what's going to happen, you're going to get only 10% of people actually move. Because why? Only 10% are actually driven by pleasure. Same thing as salespeople. That's why did agents not want to be the top agent all the time? Because most of them, they just want to avoid the pain in their life. So they'll get a check. What do? Pay the bills for the next 12 months and they quit working a little bit. They get a check, right? Versus there's only 10% of people, 1 out of 10, who are driven by what? Making a lot of money. And so that's why it's hard for me to understand sometimes of like, hey, look, why don't you just want to make a lot of money? Because most people aren't driven by that. So it's important to us to understand and have a great reminder of what this is. Okay? And so that's a key part. And so talking about things like missing out, the opportunity cost, right? If you miss out on this, right? Someone else getting a property from you. What happens if you miss this? What happens if you leave $20,000 on the table by listening to this other agent? We need to talk about pain much more. You guys with me on this? There's also 2 other types that go along with this. What do you think they are? Logic and emotion. Ready? So logic and emotion. So that's a key part here. If I'm looking at this, let's call this LRBN. This is the ERBN. What do you think that stands for? You're close. The logical reason to buy now, LRBN, and the emotional reason to buy now. Now here's the crazier part. Which one do you think makes people move the most? Emotion makes people move the most. What type of number do you think? Pretty much the same thing. 90%. What do you think most salespeople talk about? Logic every single time. Tell me what's right, DF right here. Because you're not only selling to pleasure, you're also using logic, which means you're not getting movement from the client. And so we have to make sure that we have the ability to have both in that, right? So here's the deal. Logic gets people to think. I talked a million times before. So logic gets people to do what? Think. What's emotion do?
Yeah.
Gets people to act, outright move. Yes. Emotion gets people to move, and that's the key part here. And so here's the key thing, right? If we're selling just on data, right, it takes a lot of emotion to get them to take action moving forward. You guys with me on this? Which is important. And so here's the thing. I want you guys to take time today and write out the top 5 pain points for buyers. On the listing side, top 3 pain points for sellers. And you don't got to have like crazy ones. I just think like 4 or 5 that have a lot of teeth. All right? What's going to happen if you don't? What happens if you go to the wrong agent? Like we have to make sure it's like on the listing side, the reason you keep losing these loser agents that are selling 3 or 4 homes a year is why? We're not talking about the pain enough of what happens when you go with loser agents and how it's going to cost them $40,000 in equity and all this stuff and telling third-party stories about how much the price gets dropped and how your house gets a bad name and how they see it on Zillow. It came off, now you're listed with a third person in 6 different months, right? You have to talk more about what? The pain. Because that's what gets people moving and that's what gets people to make decisions in terms of that. And,
Like the top 3 pain motivators?
yeah. So if they're a buyer, right, with the top feed, and we'll talk about that. So I'll give you guys a couple questions in a minute to do so. But there's this thing for people that makes people move. It's called the switch cost. What does that mean?
How much it cost to switch the last time?
Not exactly. What else?
When the pain probably gets to be too much for you to actually make a move.
Yes. Until the pain of not taking action becomes greater than the client associates with taking action, they will not move forward. Right? Until the pain of not taking action becomes greater than the client associates with taking action, they will not move forward. And so what does that mean? I have to create more pain and up the pain with them of not taking action compared to what they already have in their head about the pain of doing what? Taking action. So in their current situation, man, this is a lot, this is scary. I got to make this offer, right? I may have to pay over asking price, I may have to pay this buyer agency fee, right? I'm going to have a payment for 30 years. I could be over. Most buyers are scared about a couple things. What is it? They're overpaying, right? What's that? Being stuck for 30 years, right? Not being able to pay their payments. Those are like the top 3 overall. You guys with me on that? Most sellers are worried about what? Leaving money on the table, having somebody they can't trust, having somebody they can't have communication with, and just be a nightmare experience, right? And so I have to do what? So here they have a certain, and Jordan Belfort talks about this, a certain action threshold that is where it is. Until I layer pain on top of that over and over and over, and the pain of not taking action gets worse than the pain of taking action, they're not going to do anything. You with me on this? This is why I talk all the time about action threshold. Right? And the action threshold gets moved by doing what? I just said it. Layering on pain until it gets past the point of not taking action. So I layer pain, layer pain, layer pain, layer pain. This is why I talk about all the time what? In terms of what we do, we go from pit to peak. So here's somebody's life. I take them to the pit, and I take them back to the peak. So the pit here is what? Their pain. All that they're going to deal with, they don't take action. When? Now. today with me, or moving or buying or selling going forward, right? And then here, this is a pleasure or paradise. And so what this does, it creates what? A contrast. I'm constantly going to move them from pit to peak, pit to peak. And that's why you got to know the pain. That's why you got to write the pain notes. So you have that so that whenever your buyer starts to get cold, a month in, you can go back and take them back to where? The pit, the pain, and you just go back to the switch costs to get them to move action. And what's happened in most cases is that you haven't hammered the pain enough for a long enough time because it is a long sales cycle. So what happens to the pain? They forget, and it goes right back down to where they were. Why? Because why do they forget about the pain?
Because you're not taking them there, there's the pleasure of focus on getting.
And what does every single human do in today's world? Which sedate. They sedate the pain. What do?
Watch TV, smoke weed.
They scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll. Most people scroll just to do what? Escape the world, right? And so it's important for us to understand, like, I got to bring them back from sedation, this drip they have of just sedating back to a place of pain. And so for me to do that, I have to know the pain. I have to be able to go back and access the pain and take them back to that place over and over and over. But I want you to understand how many of your recent conversations with your clients have not moved because you're talking about pleasure over and over and over. It's going to be so great. You're going to love the house. You're going to love the neighborhood. All that doesn't move people. And then we're talking about what? The numbers, how great it is, and all this stuff, which doesn't have anything to do with what? Emotion, which moves them. And so one of the biggest pain points too, is what? The fear of missing out. Be things like what? What happens when someone in comes and buys this property out from under you? How are you guys going to feel about that? Right? Things like that, they're going to make a big difference, that we got to make sure that we're understanding what this is.